which is fairly, that in itself is relatively standard, in terms of psychotherapy. They're looking for that, and then they want the person to start talking about that, and then bring the person to a point of catharsis about it, right? Which would be fairly, again, relatively standard psychotherapy, in terms of, emotional methods and so on. But then it changes after that. But
what happens? What's the change?
Well, then it moves into the area of, first of all, you'll get that, and you'll get the person to desire it. Then the next thing, you'll have the person on what's called the E-meter, and then you'll get the person to start getting used to being directed by, if you like, the indications on this electropsychometer, which is literally a lie detector. Yeah.
It's like a potentiometer.
Something, a galvanometer.
Yeah, you just hold it and it reads electrical potential across both your hands or something.
Exactly, yeah. It's running a current through your body. That's what it's supposed to be doing.
What's it meant to be telling you?
Well,
anything.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's supposed to tell. Okay, this goes into the Pavlovian techniques. When the needle does a certain reaction, the counsellor gives a very specific response. Okay, so if it's what they call a good reaction, what's called a floating needle, right?
Yeah.
Which is supposed to be a moment of where the person has really confronted something. What they call the auditor, the counsellor, really validates a person and goes, "Thank you, you're very strongly emotional. Thank you, your needle is floating," they'll say, right? So, and then when the person is looking at something horrible, like, let's say anything, let's say he kicked a dog or something like that, and he feels bad about it, then the counsellor is sitting there slightly frowning, and this is very specifically trained in with the counsellor, and the person learns after a while that when he looks at a certain thing
in a certain way,
he'll get this beautiful thank you and validation. It will be the end of the session, then they'll go and then they'll complete the whole.
So it's teaching the client to be blindingly optimistic.
That's exactly right.
So hence Tom Cruise goes from compromised, worried, self-doubting to superstar. John Travolta goes from compromised, left on the heap to mega star.
Yes, exactly. That's part of it. I mean, that is part of it. Yeah, absolutely. Because you get into being very positive. You'll hear Scientologists. In fact, there's quite a lot of YouTube clips of Tom Cruise, and one of them is him standing up after having completed one of these OT levels, and you listen to him and other people, and it's amazing for me being outside of it, and again, being outside of this now, but, and seeing what people say on completion of a level, because, there's a big ceremony and
I'm going to stop you there for a moment because I've got the news coming up. Ponder this, okay? If it's so bad, why did you stay in it for so long?
Absolutely.
Back. Welcome back. In our Cork studio, we have the author, John Duignan. John is the author of The Complex. An insider exposes the covert world of the Church of Scientology. Let me, before I go back to Cork, just read you something from the book. The book is called The Complex, and that is made up of a selection of different rooms and scenarios, physical and ethereal, that make up the Scientology organisation, such as the Sea Organisation Hollywood headquarters. As is the case with all new recruits to the Sea Org, this is John himself, I had to pay my own travel costs from Stuttgart to Los Angeles, and he describes how when he got to this particular place and he began to learn what it was all about, he came into contact with a thing that was called the Rehabilitation Project Force. This is an organisation that's dedicated to re-indoctrinating somebody who's kind of gone offside in Scientology. The RPF, the Rehabilitation Project Force. What these guys end up being are basically the lowest of the low within the C organisation in Scientology. They do all the physical work. No administrative work is allowed. From 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. They do that, and then they study from 3 until 8 p.m. Work then starts again at 8:30 until 11 p.m. in the evening. They're paid 1/3 of the pay sum of regular Scientology staff, which means they get about $5 a week. That is, if the Scientology guys are actually paying that given week. They are dressed in black, berthed in the rat-infested dark basements. I noticed them my first week there. The first time I saw them, I wondered, what the fuck? They do the dirtiest imaginable work, cleaning blocked toilets, sewers, or whatever other bodily fluids can be found. They speak to nobody, but they are assigned a twin, and they have to audit one another, often for up to 5 hours a day. Then they return to hours of the hardest physical labour imaginable. Even in that first week, I could see that everybody looked down on the RPFer. These are the people who are actually being re-indoctrinated because they've decided maybe that they don't totally agree with what the Scientologists are doing. They're seen as scum and about as low as a Sea Org member could go. Here's the case of Alice. Alice had been brought up in Scientology from childhood and been with the Sea organisation for 3 years. When I knew her, she was working as a public relations officer for the Jive Aces. Her crime had been sleeping with a guy that she was attracted to. She was assigned to the United Kingdom's Rehabilitation Project Force. Her fiancé was then sent to the RPF in Australia. Alice decided to leave the church and ended up being put on an even harsher regime, the RPF's own RPF. 6 months on, and subjected to a course of daily intensive interrogations, she decided to kill herself. Alice had worked out the RPF course room. She'd walked out of it, gone to the workshop, found a tin of paint thinner. She swallowed that, climbed up on top of a gym roof, which was 15 foot high, surrounded by concrete, and jumped. Alice lived, but was crippled for life. Her lower intestine is ruined. She is to use a colostomy bag. She was a very attractive, energetic 19-year-old girl at the time. Well, that certainly sounds like... it sounds like Stalinist Russia being sent off to a gulag.
It's not far off. It's not far off, Gerry. It really isn't. The physical constraints in the RPF, in terms of actual physical constraints, are quite severe. Physically, people would actually block you trying to get out. And some people did escape. It was funny. I recently got hold of a very, very good friend of mine who escaped from that regime and has been living under an assumed name, and he's done very well business-wise, but everything is done through other people because he does not want them to find him again. He's still scared.
What I don't understand, John, is they seem to be so efficient at stopping Amazon publishing your book in the UK, and yet they can also behave in this way, and one must presume that what you've written in the book is true, or it would have been banned everywhere.
It would have been. I wouldn't have written it otherwise, Gerry.
So they seem to be very effective at what they do, but nobody else seems to be much use at stopping them.
Yeah, because they know. Look, they know how to use the legal system, and they use the legal system. I mean, you yourself, I think you're very highly qualified in that area yourself. You know how someone could use that to their advantage.
Well, using the legal system requires two things. One, a will, and money.
Yes, which Scientology has got, both of them. Absolutely, yeah. And it does, to huge effect, just incredible effect. I'll give you a look. It's a funny thing. Every year I mention in the book, I talk about this huge kind of like equivalent to Scientology Oscars, right, over at St. Hill in East Grinstead. And it's a massive plush affair, right, and all the Scientology latest and greatest are wined and dined and whatever else, right? Cruise goes there, and John Travolta goes there, and it's quite a wonderful, massive event, really. But I used to do some of the driving, the limousine driving for people that Scientology was feting that year. And most of the time I used to drive solicitors and lawyers, American and British solicitors and lawyers. And, there was like bunches of, a lot of them. These are people contracted, to work on Scientology cases. And they're put up in the most you talk about 5-star. There's places around Sussex that are, they're just innumerable stars. They're just incredible hotels and places.
So these lawyers would be sort of like the Scientology caretakers.
I don't know. No, they're the real. that's where Scientology succeeds, is using people like this. That's why no one can attack them. That's why,
because they're using the very best.
They're using the very best, and they spare no expense. And I used to drive them to the most incredible, beautiful plush hotels. I remember waiting in the lobby for 5 of them once, and I had this expensive Lexus limousine I had, and then I just couldn't believe